Hello everybody, welcome to the Wonky Angle, where I talk about electronic music, both new and old. And today I'm talking about the new album from Pluck, called Kiri Variations. Chris Clark is a very interesting artist. Guy's been at it since the dawn of this century, making mostly IDM type stuff that could be derivative at times, but still had a sound of its own in some way. And he's also managed to make all of his albums so far sound different from each other. I'd known he'd existed since 2014 or so, but it wasn't until his 2017 album Death Peak came out that he really grabbed my attention and turned me into a fan. It was fantastic hearing all of these sounds and styles typically used by experimental artists being repurposed into relatively straightforward techno formulas, and the result was an insane ride of an album that had me on the edge of my seat the entire time and continually threw creative ideas out there, yet still having a very cohesive sound tying it all together. It was absolutely stunning. I have a CD of it now too. Death Peak may very well be my personal favorite of his albums to date, though if it is, I also don't think it's by a huge margin. Like, I also loved the similar creativity on his self-titled album in 2014. I like his combination of his usual sound with some jazz and hip-hop flares on Body Riddle in 2006. I remember really enjoying his attempt at a folksier, Bibio-esque sound on Iradelphic. I've even returned to his debut, Clarence Park, a few times, since that one has a strange rustic feel to it that I don't get out of any other IDM projects. His other albums I don't remember as much, haven't listened to since I did that Death Peak video. I remember finding Empty the Bones of You a bit too derivative for my taste, and Totem's Flare and Turning Dragon I just don't really remember much at all. Maybe I'd like them a lot more if I actually listened to them again and refresh my memories. I didn't really go down the entire catalog all over again for this video. But never mind that. Point is, I like this guy's stuff. So for that reason I wanted to check out his latest project, Kiri Variations. It's his first ever self-released project after having released all his other albums on Warp Records. Also, I heard this was going to be his take on a modern classical project. I figured gotta be worth a shot. I like me some modern classical every now and then, like that Niels Frahm album from last year, for instance, really stuck with me in the long term. I wasn't expecting this to be the greatest thing I've ever heard, but Clark has really been impressing me with his most recent project, so I just popped this on, and what did we get? Well, big surprise, this is not as good as the self-titled or Death Peak, but I thought it was pretty solid. Certainly less electronic than most of his previous releases, again more of a modern classical thing with violins and cellos and pianos and the like. Several tracks that include vocals as well, but it's still got some synths in there that are recognizably Clark, some sounds that call to mind those last two albums. Certainly has the intensity of the ambient parts from the back half of Death Peak. Right from the outset you get a good taster of what you're getting into with Forebode Pluck, which lives up to its title in being quite foreboding. Mostly pianos and some whispery vocals, but there's a really overtly creepy harpsichord section in the middle that just crashes in your face, though it gets a bit more subtle near the end. And throughout the track listing we get a relatively wide variety of moods and textures like that. Not all of them give me interesting things to say, but they're all enjoyable in their own ways. Simple Homecoming Loop is relatively calm and comforting. Bench contrasts its synth bass with a pretty harrowing cello line and is a change up into some noisy ambience in the last minute or so. There's an entire track of that kind of synth ambience with Flask/Abyss as well, and something similar with these super reverby harpsichords on Banished Hymnal. Tracks like these are a nice addition and add variety. There's tracks that give me that kind of unsettling vibe like Yarraville Bird Phone. The really dissonant pianos in the beginning there give me this vibe that heavily reminds me of the piano soundtracks to Matthew Skutnick's Daymare Town games. Though there's also warmer and more comforting sections. Like, it also features this male vocal lead near the end too, saying, "Hold on, hold on," a few times. That vocalist is on a few different tracks all over this thing. Forebode Knocker, for instance, he's going, "Huh, huh." That vocalist isn't credited, so I assume that it's Clark himself. He does bring an interesting flavor to tracks like these and can make them sound all the creepier when he wants to. This particular track was one of the more interesting ones. Went through quite a few different sounds in the 4.5 minutes that it went on, though my enjoyment also wore off a little with repeat listens. But there's also a couple of female vocalists too, like Cannibal coming. I suppose Clark is doing a duet with Rebecca Tilley. Never heard of her, but whatever. She's pretty nice. Kind of has this creakiness to her voice that makes her sound older, though she still hits all the notes. That track also has some big banging electronic percussion on it too, that they're giving me some vibes that call me back to his last two albums a little. Similarly, there's some choirs on tracks like Primary Pluck that remind me of the choirs on Catastrophe Anthem from his last album. That track was probably my personal favorite in the bunch. I do tend to prefer the tracks that had like a warmer vibe to them, like that one, or Tobi Thwarted is another one. They do really feel like they have a lot of emotion put into all the performances. Though there are also moments I wasn't as huge on. The track Kiri's Glee kind of felt a little Uncanny Valley-ish. Like it was almost trying to be happy sounding, but everything was just a little bit off. Especially that out-of-tune flute-ish sound in the beginning kind of put me off. I mean, it was probably intended to get under my skin, but I still wasn't huge on it. Same with the closer, Goodnight Kiri. Like that one, especially when you had a better and more satisfying closer with the previous track, Banished Cannibal, that had a much warmer and more subtle feel to it, that would have been a good way to go out. But then finishing on this strangely ambiguous piece with kid vocals that make sour and dissonant harmonies, that, once again, I can't totally tell are supposed to feel off like that. It just kind of leaves me off on a weird note. But moments like these I wouldn't really want removed from the track listing either. Having the creepier moments contrast with the warmer moments makes both more impactful. So yeah, that's all I got on Kiri Variations. Overall, this album is cool. It doesn't feel to me as substantial and offering as maybe some other albums of his. It seems like a bit of a side venture, an attempt to do something, like, out of his comfort zone. But I also can't say it's unlike anything I've heard before, either. Like, I was reminded of an album from last year by DJ Drum called Portrait with Firewood. It had a couple of moments of modern classical elements that hit really similar notes for me, though that is a very different album, and it's only a few select moments that gave me similar vibes. I think that album's also much stronger than this one, but whatever. I guess what I'm saying is that I don't think I was really blown away by this project. I liked it. There's not a lot that I can say, like, negatively about it, but I didn't love it. I thought it was maybe a bit on the forgettable side, and I really don't think it's the kind of project that's going to stick with me in the long term. But it's also the kind of project that I think helps add to Clark's dimensionality as an artist. I'm glad it exists. I'm sure his next album isn't going to sound much of anything like this. Maybe you have a couple of elements in common. I don't know. This album is pretty solid. I enjoyed myself pretty much the whole way through. I think he succeeded in what he was trying to accomplish and helped make his back catalog more diverse. If you like you some modern classical like this, it's worth a shot. I guess that's about it, though. I mean, I don't think it's his best album, but it's a fun experiment. I think I'm feeling like a solid 7 out of 10. But of course, this is just my opinion. You can feel free to disagree with it, but I'd like to hear your thoughts, so leave the comments in the comment thing down there. Shout out to my Patreon supporters. They're awesome people. You want to add yourself to that list or make me review something, link to my Patreon is in the description. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all for today. See you next time.